Me, like Dennis, I always wanted to be an architect from the age of 10. Never want to be a fireman and everything like that, and I wanted to be an architect. But my parents let me watch, funny enough, Ken Adam, James Bond movies when I was a kid, all the way to the end when I was too young to watch some to the end. And I always wanted to know, well, who picked those beautiful locations and created those crazy places? And eventually I went to school to be an architect, and I worked for a couple of years as an architect. But Toronto at the time in the early 90s was just booming for film, and there was also a bust for architects. Like, there was a recession, so I kind of pounded the pavement a bit. I had some friends that I met that worked in film when I moved to Toronto, and I volunteered in the art department. And after about 4 days of working for nothing, a paid job came up for $100 a day, driving a cube truck for set deck. So I was broke, and so I took that job. And then I would, those are independent films, non-union films, so you got to, be the on-set painter, on-set carpenter, and set dresser. So I got to kind of see what went on, and it was a good background, because I don't think often you don't get that. If you just go through the art department proper, you don't see what happens on the set. And then eventually I figured I had to draw these sets instead, and then I pounded the pavement again, and eventually got in the union, and that's where it went from.
Well, the sets were amazing. One of the questions that I have is, how do you prepare, and this is a two-parter for all of you, how do you prepare for an apartment that is underwater? I mean, and how did you achieve that?
Well, we didn't really put it underwater.
Okay.
That's another budget.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, we were a pretty small movie, so we could afford to build a small tank just for the bathroom, but the rest of the apartment we did an older technique, dry for wet technique, and there was a lot of trickery with, just like Nathan was talking about, trickery on the beach with cutouts. We had everything on wires and a lot of smoke, and it was slow motion a little bit. They slowed it down a little bit so that movement was a little slower. Digital effects obviously did the fish and the opening a little bit and added particulate in the water, but they projected this caustic light, projections of caustic light through the smoke, and digitally they added the hair and the costume, but pretty much everything else was just floating on wires, old school.
Wow, that's great. And how do you two divide your duties?
I don't think we really divide them. I think we just work together. The three of us worked really well together, actually, on this film, and just developed everything as a group, from the laboratories and the apartments. And we don't have any rules to follow for our division, do we? And we're still doing that. I was very upset, though, that they ruined that sofa with all those wires, and it's very upsetting.
Well, always a little L&D, I think.
Yeah.
In the great film The Graduate, there's the word plastic that's brought up. In your case, plastics. In your case, I would say it's teal. How did you guys take a color and turn it into a concept that is sort of pervasive throughout the entire movie? What was that journey?
Well, first of all, Guillermo is obsessed with color, and he loves teal, and he's used
Obviously.
it in a lot of his films. So, the amazing thing about when you're working for him, it's really not about the dressing and the set, it's about your color blocking. So you really have to step back and look at it as a painting and color block everything in that you do. Every set had an important color, every set had a muted palette, so you sort of work back that way and sort of painted in your furniture according to color. So not just the teal, but most of the colors that he has, he's very particular about, and he tends to fine-tune that with each one of his films. So there you go.
And I love the contrast between Richard Jenkins' apartment. It was so warm, and there were so many layers, and Eliza's was lovely as well. And I noticed also in the hallways, the wallpaper sort of made it feel like fish scales to me. I don't know if that was the intention, but how did that come about?
And those were all built sets, I'm assuming.
Yeah, pretty much. We shot 58 days, and 40 days were in the studio, and 18 were on location. Even though it wasn't a very big film, Guillermo prefers to shoot in the studio for the control, and again for the control of the color palette. But Shane actually found that wallpaper here in California, Bradbury, and we picked the just like you said, the scales. We picked that scalloped block print for her apartment for the scales. And her apartment was all in the aqua colors, and then on purpose, Giles's apartment was in the, well, actually all the empathetic characters were in this warmer hue, golds, mustards, and things like that. And then Dan Louston, the DP, lit her side with a sort of steel blue gels, and then on it was always golden light. It was always magic hour on Giles's side. So, but we had to work with props and costumes as well, very, very carefully for the color.
Did you actually create a color Bible for the different sets so that everyone had a clear reference?
Yeah, actually, day one, we met with Guillermo. I met with Guillermo, and then Louis met with Guillermo separately, and we literally went through all the big box of colors, and we just quickly went through them all to pick roughly the color patterns for each, or color palette for each character, and then I would narrow mine down to like a 40 colors, and I put them on a board, and then we all had that board, and then Louis Costumes also did the same thing with fabric swatches, and we each had our own board, and then it was really easy from then on, because we did that day one, and usually that doesn't happen, so it was pretty, I think that's why it's successful, because we all worked on that same palette from the beginning.
And then there was the black and white musical number. That was pretty
The
spectacular.
whole movie was going to be black and white, which was terrified me, actually.
Oh my God. It's not so bad.
No, but that was basically, you just did a recreation from that film, did you not? Yeah.
More or less. It was an homage to that film. I mean, we added musicians, and I wanted the ground to be more like watery, and in that original movie it was white with very minimal black. I went the opposite, just so that the black reflected all the stars, and it was a bit shimmery.
And it was basically all in camera, your show, wasn't it?
Pretty much. We extended some streets, because
Sure.
we'd only do we could afford to do about 4 or 5 shops, and then when the bus panned away, digitally they extended it. They did that a couple of times, but essentially it was in camera, and the creature was augmented, the eyes and
Yes, of course.
emotion. Couldn't get it all through the latex.
Yeah. What was that fire at the end of the block about?
That was Guillermo's story point, the chocolate. The smell of napalm in the morning. It was the smell of chocolate. There was a giant Eaton Center shopping mall right there, and it had to be digitally altered, and so it became this chocolate thing. We built the theater marquee. That theater didn't have a marquee. Guillermo would pick that because he really wanted the exterior fire escapes, symmetrical fire escapes coming down the thing. So we only had a day and a half to install it, but we built that marquee on there, and then we shot it overnight, and we had a half a day to take it out. They added the upper portion, but the lower portion we built practically.
Right. But the theater was a real theater.
Yeah, we didn't really do anything in the theater.
Yeah. Except star on the screen, which was very good. Being a child of sci-fi movies from the 50s and 60s and growing up watching those great films, I got to say, your renditions of sort of the evil military-industrial complex in their labs was just spot on. It was just brought me back to those moments in time of those Saturday matinees, and so was that just researched by just sort of drilling down deep into a lot of those old films and finding a vernacular that you could apply to this, or?
Actually, Guillermo has a vast knowledge of films, but he didn't really delve into that part so much. That actually, the idea from that came from a picture of a sanatorium I found in France, and then we just developed. And I've only worked with him on 3 movies. Only 1 was realized, but he's done lots of other movies with lots of pipes. He likes pipes. And we ended up exploring using those pipes as this, the mad crown on top of the one, and then the setting sun set of pipes in the other. And it's just something that Guillermo enjoys, and we pushed it a little bit here. We started with real reference, and then it's a Guillermo movie, so we went a little more fantastical on it afterwards. And these guys had they had to deal with all those pipes.
There's a lot.
I like pipes as much as him. I think the fun thing on that film was that we were able to research down all these Nassau control room or a Russian power plant, and we didn't have to be historically accurate. We had to create the era, but then we could, develop and riff on that and create our own environment, that had the tone of the 60s, but we didn't have to match anything. So we got a mixed bag of things in there. So that was really fun. We had the freedom, but we also have illustrations in Guillermo to pay attention to.
It's nice to have the little bit of freedom away from the historical references that they had to deal with. So that's great.
It's a little easier.
Well, it's beautiful work, and it holds together on so many levels. Thank you so much.